it's a pretty simple question that Michael posed, which is the government are citing the Insurrection Act as the rationale and the legal tool by which they can do what they're doing. You said it's illegal and wrong and they shouldn't be doing it, but you seem to be struggling to explain what the Insurrection Act actually is. And Michael, quite rightly, is saying, well, can you just tell us?
Well, whatever it is, when the National Guards are picking up trash and the National...
Well, Hey everyone, this is Matt Wills with Defining Ethos. Now I've got this awesome clip where U.S. Congressman Shri Thanedar doesn't want the National Guard to come into his home state of Michigan, and Michael Knowles straight exposes his lack of knowledge.
I want to talk specifically about the deployment of federal troops, not necessarily the wider separate issue of what ICE is doing with undocumented people in the United States. I've debated that a lot. We can touch on that in a moment, but just specifically on the deployment of federal troops in states which are not DC, where obviously the federal government can do that. The president has that power. You know, there is this raging argument now about whether it is constitutional, whether it is lawful for the president of the United States to do what Trump is now rolling out in places like Chicago. What is your view of that?
It's not only not legal, it's not only unconstitutional, but more importantly, it's not even good business, because this costs so much, putting federal troops in cities. Instead of that, if federal government can give the grants so that local police, law enforcement can hire more people. Right now, they are severely understaffed. They don't have the resources they need to keep our cities safe. Now, in a long-term process,
So he just kind of contradicted himself right there. It's like, we don't need the federal troops to come in, and then says, oh, well, their police forces are understaffed and they need more money. So this is actually one of the reasons of using the Insurrection Act, is if a city can't protect its people from the crime, that's actually one of the uses of the Insurrection Act. So yeah, that's absolutely what you'd use it for.
But aren't you answering your question? I mean, aren't you
I think
answering
you're
the
making
question?
the point.
Right. I mean, in a way, what you just said is the rationale for doing it, isn't it? I mean, they're under-resourced. They don't have enough people. They can't control the crime. Donald Trump is recognizing this, and he's doing something about it. And I'm curious about how many regular Americans who live in some of these very crime-ridden inner cities in America are really as opposed to it as you sound like you are, because if you've got a lot of crime going on around you and you know the police are woefully under-resourced, why would you object to seeing some troops on the streets to just try and restore order and perhaps send a real message to criminals?
see, putting military and reserves all over America, major American cities, and militarization of our country is not the solution. The solution is empower the local law enforcement, give them the funds that they need. It's the funding that needs to come so we can have a more long-term, long-lasting solution to it.
Congressman, are you familiar with the Insurrection Act?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And this
so
is
what do you think
time...
that's for? You said that this was illegal. You said it was not unconstitutional and illegal for the federal government to send National Guard into cities and states. What do you think the Insurrection Act is for?
Well, look, this is a issue that...
Well, look, hey. So Michael Knowles just light bulb in his head. This guy doesn't know what this is. Let me ask him about this. And instead of answering what it is, well, look, hey, and he starts pivoting. Let's see what he does.
The local government should be handling. What is the
answer to
I don't think you understand the Insurrection Act.
Right, to Michael's... well, let me just ask, Congressman, do you actually know what the Insurrection Act says?
Yes, but this is...
hang on. Yes. What does it say?
Well, look, what we saw happen in January 6th in the Congress, that's insurrection.
That's not the question. The question is, are you familiar? Obviously, the government is citing the Insurrection Act as the empowerment to do what it's doing. Are you familiar with what the Insurrection Act
But
allows.
look, this president has used all kinds of excuses to break the law. This
Okay, so he doesn't know what the Insurrection Act is. So this is actually really funny. Michael Knowles, he figures it out. This guy doesn't know it. The guy pivots. Piers Morgan tries to bring him back. Hey, do you know what this is? Yeah. So it's funny because he cites January 6th. Oh, that's an insurrection. So what he's trying to say is if the people try to violently overthrow the government, that's insurrection. But the Insurrection Act is actually intended for a lot of different uses. So, for instance, if cities are not allowing the rights of the people, then you can invoke the Insurrection Act. That's been used a couple times during desegregation. If there are uprisings in different cities and states that could be threatening, then you could invoke the Insurrection Act. But also, just if there's enough violence, you can invoke the Insurrection Act because the police can't handle it. And that's, the reason why you would do this. Now, this should be frightening to anyone living in Michigan that this is your congressman, right? So, knowing the Insurrection Act isn't something everyone needs to know. A congressman needs to know it, especially if this is something that a congressman is in the middle of dealing with. But also, I don't know if he knew the topics before he came on the show. If he did, my goodness, ChatGPT the crap, right?
No, but that is the law. So what is the law, Congressman? You say you're familiar with the Insurrection Act, but you don't seem to be able to describe what it does, and you're actually contradicting it. So what do you think the Insurrection Act does?
Look, the issue here is that we need our cities safe. Americans want.
Well, Congressman, with all due respect, that's not an answer to the question. I mean,
Michael, can you lay out what you believe allows Donald Trump to act so unlawfully?
Hang on, Jack. I'm going to come to you very shortly, but just to be clear, Congressman, it's a pretty simple question that Michael posed, which is the government are citing the Insurrection Act as the rationale and the legal tool by which they can do what they're doing. You said it's illegal and wrong, and they shouldn't be doing it. But you seem to be struggling to explain what the Insurrection Act actually is. And Michael, quite rightly, is saying, well, can you just tell us?
Well, whatever it is, when the National Guards are picking up trash and the National...
Well, that was one of the funniest things. Well, whatever it is. I can't with this guy, man.
Grants are watering the flowers. That is not Insurrection Act, and that's not what this is meant to be.
But do you know what it is?
Okay, so he's saying whatever it is, if the National Guard is going into water flowers and pick up trash, that's a waste of the money used to do it. As if there's just no crime to see here. They're just going to come in and clean the place up a little bit. Total waste of funds. But, I mean, yeah, so that's, of course, we've all seen what's going on. In fact, these same guys are the ones being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're in here, badgering people and this and that. So it's clearly not what's going on.
What this is meant to be.
But do you know what it is, the act?
Yeah.
What is it?
When there is an insurrection, the government has powers to use military, use reserve to address those situations. And this is clearly not the situation here. What we need to do is empower local law enforcement.
Okay, Michael, your response to that?
Congressman might be a little bit confused because he said that the federal government is breaking the law by sending the National Guard in to restore order to the cities where crime has spiraled out of control, where there's obviously a violation of federal law with all of the illegal aliens running about, and that is actually what it's for. We have a federal government in order to step in when the local and state governments fail. And so this has been used many, many times, not merely to restore order if there's some violent revolution, but even, for instance, to desegregate schools. This has been used many, many times over the course of American history. There's nothing illegal about it. And in fact, what President Trump is doing right now is one of the clearest and most just uses of the Insurrection Act when you have cities that are failing, that as in your own words, cannot enforce the law, are under-resourced, and are falling into disorder. So I think you've made a good argument for what President Trump is doing.
I hope you guys enjoyed that clip. Go like and subscribe right now if you want to keep up to date on content like this.